the girl no one wanted. The slave market was loud. Creatures from many worlds walked between cages, wooden platforms, and metal pens. Shouts and laughter filled the air. Sellers waved their arms, calling out prices. Buyers argued over young, strong slaves. Guards watched everything with cold eyes. But in the far corner, no one looked. There, tied to a wooden plank, lay a small alien girl. Her arms were skinny. Her skin, once silver blue, was now covered in dirt and old wounds. Flies buzzed around her face. Her clothes were torn and hanging like rags. Her lips were cracked, and her eyes were half closed. "She's still breathing?" one alien buyer asked. "Barely," said the auctioneer, spitting on the ground. "She won't last another cycle." The buyer walked away. No one made an offer. No one asked her name. She didn't move. Not when a young boy threw a pebble at her. Not when a guard poked her with a stick to see if she'd react. The girl didn't cry, didn't speak. She simply blinked, slow and tired. She had stopped hoping a long time ago. Once, long ago, someone might have cared. But she had been passed from master to master, too weak to work, too quiet to serve, too damaged to be useful. Now she was just there. The sun grew hotter. The flies stayed. The market noise went on, until a man stepped into the square. He was human, tall, middle-aged, with sunburned skin and dusty boots. He didn't look rich or strong. He walked with a slow, careful step, carrying a small bag on his shoulder. His name was Mason. He wasn't looking for a slave. He had come to the market for machine parts. But as he passed by, something caught his eye. A girl. A very still, silent girl, tied and left like trash. He stopped. "Is she dead?" he asked the auctioneer. The auctioneer grinned. "Alive. Barely. Want her? Only 10 credits. Just take her away." Mason didn't answer. He stepped closer. The flies flew off for a moment. The girl's eyes blinked again, just once. He crouched down beside her. "Can you hear me?" he asked softly. No reply. He saw the bruises on her wrists, her dry lips, the way her ribs showed through her skin. She was so small, so forgotten. The auctioneer laughed. "You won't get much from that one, human. Just bones and trouble." Still no answer from Mason. He stood up, looked around. Everyone had moved on. No one cared what he did. Then he pulled out a few coins and handed them over. 10 credits? he asked. 10 credits, the auctioneer grinned. "All yours. Cut the rope," Mason said. "Ha, you sure?" "Fine." The auctioneer used a small blade to slice the rope. The girl's body slowly rolled off the plank. She didn't scream, didn't fight. She just lay there, blinking. Mason gently picked her up. She was light as air. Her head leaned against his chest, and for the first time in weeks, her body felt warmth. Not from the sun, but from a living being. Someone was holding her. The crowd stared. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. "Humans are strange," one alien muttered. "Must be lonely," said another. Mason didn't care. He walked through the market, carrying her like a sleeping child. One hand held her close. The other kept the sun from her face. She didn't speak, didn't even lift her head. But deep inside, something had changed. For the first time in forever, someone had picked her. Mason carried the girl through the hot, dusty paths of the market. The sun burned above them, and every step made a small cloud of dirt rise beneath his boots. People stared, whispered, even laughed. But he didn't stop. He walked with care, as if holding something fragile, something precious. The girl's head rested lightly on his chest, and though her eyes were open, they looked distant, as if part of her still wasn't sure this was real. He found a shaded corner and sat on a wooden crate, keeping the girl close. She hadn't spoken, moved, or reacted. Her skin was warm, not with life, but with heat and fever. He opened his bag, pulled out a small bottle of clean water, and gently poured a few drops on her lips. They trembled, just slightly. Then, like a baby bird, she opened her mouth and he helped her drink. She didn't gulp or grab. It was slow, scared like someone who had been punished before for asking. "Easy now," Mason whispered. "You're safe." But was she? He looked down at her, how thin her arms were, how many scars marked her wrists and neck. She must have been hurt over and over, sold again and again only to be thrown away. 10 credits. That was all she had been worth. Less than a broken tool, less than a crate of spoiled fruit. A group of traders walked past, still chuckling, from earlier. "That human paid for garbage," one said. "He's soft," said another. "Probably thinks she'll love him for saving her." Mason didn't respond. He didn't buy her for love. He didn't buy her to feel proud. He did it because no one else would. And something about her eyes, something haunted him. When she had blinked, just once, back on that wooden plank, it wasn't empty. It wasn't fear. It was sadness. Deep sadness. Like she had already accepted she was nothing. And Mason had seen that look before, years ago during the war, in the eyes of children left behind. He reached into his bag again and found an old ration bar. He broke it into small pieces and held one near her mouth. She didn't move. But then, slowly, her lips opened. Her teeth weakly bit into it. She chewed like she hadn't tasted food in days, maybe weeks. Crumbs fell on her chin and Mason gently wiped them away. He didn't ask her name. Not yet. He could see she wasn't ready. Later he stood up again, still holding her. He walked toward the old part of the market, where repair shops and broken machines were stacked high. He knew a place there. A small room he sometimes rented when traveling. The owner, an old alien with greasy hands, looked up as Mason entered. "You've brought something strange," the alien said, eyes narrowing at the girl in his arms. "She's mine now," Mason said quietly. "I just need a place for a few days." The alien shrugged. 10 credits a night. Mason nodded and placed the coins on the table. The alien handed him a rusted key. Inside the room, there was only a metal cot, a small sink, and an old heater. Mason laid the girl down gently on the cot. She curled up automatically like someone used to sleeping on cold ground. He removed her shoes, or what was left of them. Her feet were raw, blistered, with old dried blood between her toes. He found a clean cloth and warm water, then carefully began to clean her feet. She didn't stop him, didn't pull away, but a single tear rolled from the corner of her eye and soaked into the cot. He didn't speak. He didn't ask her to thank him. He just kept working, gently, slowly, trying to bring some life back into her broken body. That night he didn't sleep much. He sat in the chair beside the cot, watching over her. At some point she moved in her sleep and whispered something, a word, or maybe a sound. Mason couldn't tell. But it was the first thing she had said. The next morning he woke to find her sitting up, just barely. Her back was straight, her eyes open. She looked at him, as if truly seeing him for the first time. He smiled gently. "Morning." She didn't reply, but her lips moved, trying. Her voice was dry, barely a whisper. But Mason thought she said, "Why?" He leaned forward and said quietly, "Because you matter." She stared at him. "Because no one should be sold for 10 credits, he added. "You're not garbage. You're not a thing." A long silence passed between them. Then, for the first time, she nodded, just once. The girl sat on the edge of the metal cot, her knees pulled close to her chest, her arms wrapped around them like a shield. Her skin still held old bruises, and her eyes were wide and watchful, like an animal afraid of every shadow. She didn't know what to make of the human man who sat nearby, not touching her, not speaking unless she looked at him. He hadn't asked her name. He hadn't made her do anything. He just sat in that chair, reading something on a small device or looking her way with a calm face. She didn't understand him. Most creatures who bought her wanted something right away. Orders, demands, pain. But this man, he had picked her up from the dirt and carried her gently. He gave her food, water, warmth, a bed. He even cleaned her feet with soft hands and didn't flinch at the wounds. She had waited for the shouting, the hitting, the orders, but none came. The silence was worse somehow. He hadn't even asked what she could do. Was she still a slave? Or something else? Her mind was tired, her body sore. She hadn't spoken in so long that her voice felt trapped deep inside her. Her last owner said she was too quiet to be useful. He had stopped feeding her. When she collapsed, he left her at the market and laughed, saying even flies wouldn't want her. But this man, he had looked at her like she mattered. She glanced at him now. He was drinking something warm from a small cup, his eyes tired but kind. He looked over and smiled a little. "You don't have to be scared," he said, his voice low and calm. "I'm not here to hurt you." She blinked slowly. He pointed to a folded cloth and soap on the chair near the sink. "If you want to clean up, I'll step outside for a while, or I can help if you want." She didn't move. She just stared. Then, slowly, she let her legs drop from the cot. Her feet touched the floor. She stood up, not fully straight, but enough to walk. She reached for the cloth and soap with shaking hands. Mason smiled gently and stood. "I'll be outside. Take your time." He stepped out and closed the door behind him. Inside, the girl stared at her own reflection in the tiny cracked mirror. Her face was pale, lips dry, eyes sunken. She didn't recognize herself. She turned on the water and it ran over her fingers, warm and clean. She had forgotten what that felt like. She slowly washed her face, then her arms, wiping away layers of dirt. When she ran the cloth over her neck, she saw old slave marks, faint lines burned into her skin. She washed them too. When she was done, she put on the soft shirt Mason had left folded on the cot. Outside the door, Mason waited, leaning against the wall. The market was still loud down the street, but here it was quiet. He didn't know what her story was, but he didn't need to. He had seen too many lives destroyed by cruelty, by greed. He just wanted her to feel human again, or whatever her species' version of that was. He wanted her to feel alive. The door creaked open. She stood there, cleaner, now hair damp, clothes loose but dry. She looked unsure, like she didn't believe she was allowed to feel warm. Mason smiled again. "You look better." She looked down, shy. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded, very slowly. He opened a food packet, soft and warm, and handed her half. She sat back on the cot, eating carefully, still alert. After a few minutes, she looked at him. Her lips moved again. He leaned closer. "Why?" she whispered. His chest ached at the sound. It was small, fragile, but it was her voice. He sat on the floor beside the cot and answered gently, "Because you were lying there like your life didn't matter. And that's not right." She blinked. "No one should be treated like that," he said. "Not even if they can't speak. Not even if they're scared." Her hands shook as she held the food. A tear slipped down her cheek and she quickly wiped it with her arm. He didn't say anything more. They sat in silence again. But this time, it felt different. She wasn't just a body on a cot anymore. She was someone. And for the first time in her memory, someone had seen her that way. The room was quiet the next morning. A warm light came through the broken wooden blinds as the sun rose. The girl lay awake, not moving, listening to the sounds outside. Distant voices, wheels turning, a dog barking. But no shouting, no chains, no angry footsteps. For once, no one had kicked her awake. She turned her head slightly and saw the human, Mason, still asleep in the chair beside her. His arms were crossed, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. His face looked tired but peaceful. He hadn't chained her in the night, he hadn't yelled, he hadn't left, he had stayed. The blanket around her was soft and smelled like clean cloth. She sat up slowly, feeling the soreness in her muscles but also something new. Safety. Mason stirred when she moved. He opened one eye, then smiled gently. "Morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "You sleep okay?" She gave the smallest nod. "Good," he replied, stretching. "I was thinking, maybe you'd like a real bath today. There's a wash station behind the building." Her heart skipped. A bath? She hadn't had one and she couldn't remember. Most places she was sold to didn't care if she was clean. Sometimes they hosed her down like an animal. Other times, they didn't bother at all. But a real bath? Mason stood up slowly and grabbed a fresh towel, a bar of soap, and a small bottle of scented oil. "I'll take you there. It's private. No one will bother us." She looked unsure. Her hands clenched. "The blanket. You don't have to if you're not ready," he said softly. "But I thought maybe it would feel nice." She stood up. Her legs were weak but steady. She followed him outside without a word. The back of the building was quiet. Mason led her to a closed wooden door with steam slipping through the cracks. He opened it, revealing a small room with a large basin of heated water, a stool, and clean cloths on a hook. "I'll wait outside," he said. "If you need help, knock once." She stepped inside and looked around. The door closed. At first, she just stood there staring at the water. It was clean, warm, and deep enough to soak in. She placed her hand in it and flinched. It was too good, too gentle. She took off the soft clothes Mason had given her, folding them with care. Then she stepped into the water. It was like being held. The warmth wrapped around her thin body, touching every sore muscle, every old bruise. She gasped softly, not in pain, but in relief. Her hands moved slowly, rubbing the soap across her skin. Dirt, oil, and dried blood began to wash away. The water darkened. Her silver blue skin started to show underneath, brighter than she remembered. She touched her face and saw herself clearly for the first time in years. She wasn't ugly. She wasn't broken. She wasn't trash. She was someone. When she was done, she dried off with the soft towel and poured the scented oil into her hands. It smelled like wildflowers. She touched her arms with it gently, as if each part of her body was waking up. She looked into the mirror again. Her face was clean, her eyes clear, and something unexpected happened. She smiled. It was tiny, barely there, but it was real, and it belonged to her. She dressed in the clean clothes Mason had left folded on a stool. They were loose, comfortable, and warm. She took one last look at herself and then knocked softly on the door. Mason opened it. His eyes widened. "You look—" He paused, then smiled. "You look like you again." She looked down, a little shy, but her smile didn't disappear. They walked back together in silence, but a comfortable silence. Mason made her warm tea in the room and placed a small mirror in her hand. She kept looking into it. Then, as he handed her a piece of fruit, something amazing happened. She laughed. It was quiet, a little shaky, but it was laughter. Real, soft, and alive. Mason froze for a second, then chuckled too. "That's the best sound I've heard all week." She covered her mouth, embarrassed, but her eyes sparkled. For a moment, the pain faded. The market, the chains, the past, it all seemed far away. She wasn't the girl left in the dirt anymore. She had bathed. She had smiled. She had laughed. And for the first time in her life, she felt clean, not just outside, but inside too. The girl sat cross-legged on the soft mat Mason had laid near the heater. Her clean clothes were simple but warm, and her long silver blue hair had been brushed back, no longer knotted or tangled. She held a pencil between her thin fingers and stared at the blank page in front of her. It had been days since Mason brought her from the market. In that time, he had not asked her for anything. No work, no stories, not even a name. He just gave her space, food, warmth, and safety. Every morning, he'd greet her with a smile. Every night, he'd leave her the bed and take the chair. He treated her not as something he bought, but as someone he cared for. And now, for the first time, he had given her something she didn't expect, a notebook. A place to keep your thoughts, he'd said, laying it gently on her lap. Or your story, or even just your name if you still remember it. That last line echoed in her head. If you still remember it. She looked at the blank page and felt her heart beat faster. Did she? When she was very young, before the cages, before the collars, before her voice was taken, someone had called her by name. A woman's voice, soft and kind. The memory was like fog. She couldn't see the face, but the voice was clear. She closed her eyes and focused. Raleigh, the voice had said once, tucking her into sleep. Little Raleigh, dream of flying stars. A small gasp escaped her lips. That was it. That was her name. Raleigh. She opened her eyes, picked up the pencil with shaking fingers, and slowly wrote the word on the top of the page. Raleigh. Mason, who had been fixing a broken tool in the corner, looked up when he heard the pencil move. He didn't say anything right away. He just waited, patient as always. She turned the notebook toward him. His eyes widened. That's you? He asked softly. She nodded once. Raleigh, he said aloud, letting the name fill the room. That's beautiful. She had not heard her name in years. Not spoken, not sung, not whispered. To hear it again, and from someone who meant it with respect, felt like breathing after nearly drowning. Mason walked over and sat beside her, not too close. He looked down at the notebook and smiled. You gave me your name, he said. That means a lot. She looked at him, unsure of how to respond. She still couldn't say much. Her voice was weak and words were hard, but she opened the notebook again and wrote another short sentence under her name. Thank you for seeing me. He read it slowly. His smile faded, not from sadness, but from something deeper. He understood. They sat together in silence, not needing anything else. Raleigh looked at the page again. It was no longer empty. She had written her name. She had written something true, and now it felt like she had taken the first step toward becoming herself again. Later that afternoon, Mason showed her how to use a small tool to fix wiring on broken machines. She watched closely. Her hands were small but careful. She didn't ask questions out loud, but he could tell she understood quickly. You're a fast learner, he said. She gave a small smile. By evening, she had helped repair a broken motor and cleaned up spilled parts. Mason didn't treat her like a helper or a worker. He treated her like an equal. He showed her, taught her, and let her try things on her own. When she made a mistake, he didn't get angry. He laughed, gently corrected her, and encouraged her to try again. Each small act added something new to her heart. By the time the sky turned dark and the room filled with quiet shadows, she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. That night, before sleeping, she opened the notebook again. On the second page, she drew a star. Below it, she wrote 3 words. I am Raleigh. Then she closed the book, held it against her chest, and whispered her name to herself, like a song only she could hear. Raleigh was beginning to feel like she belonged somewhere. Each morning, she helped Mason clean parts, sort tools, or repair broken machines that local traders brought in. She didn't speak much, but her hands were steady now, her eyes alert. She even started humming softly when no one was around. Mason never pushed her to talk, never asked about her past. He just let her be. And that quiet respect became her new world. But peace never lasts long, not for someone with chains in her past. It happened on a gray afternoon. The wind was strong outside, pushing dust through the cracks in the workshop door. Mason was out collecting supplies and Raleigh was inside, wiping a metal panel clean when she heard the heavy sound of boots. Not Mason's. She froze. 3 large aliens walked in, rough-looking, dressed in worn armor, eyes scanning the place like they owned it. One of them had a scar across his forehead. The other 2 stood behind him like shadows. The scarred one looked around, then smiled when he saw her. There you are, he said, his voice thick and oily. Didn't think I'd find you again. Runt. Raleigh's blood turned cold. Her hands trembled. She stepped back slowly, bumping into the wall. She knew that voice, that face. He was one of her former owners. "You thought you could run?" he hissed, stepping closer. "You belong to me. Still got the papers." Raleigh shook her head. Her lips parted, trying to form words, but nothing came. She backed toward the workbench, her notebook lying open on top. Her name, Raleigh, was written in bold, careful letters. The man saw it and scoffed. "Raleigh?" He laughed. "You don't get names. You're a product." She grabbed the notebook and clutched it to her chest like a shield. He moved faster now. "Let's go. You've had your little game. Time to come back." But before he could touch her, a voice stopped him. "Step away from her." "Mason." He stood in the doorway, dusty from the road, eyes locked on the scarred alien with an expression Raleigh had never seen before, calm but deadly. "She's mine," the alien said. "Bought and paid. Got the seal on record." "She's free," Mason said coldly. "No, she ain't. You bought her, didn't you?" the man snarled. "That means she's still property. You're just another owner. I'm here to take her back or take her from you. Doesn't matter." Mason stepped closer. His voice didn't rise, but each word felt like a hammer. "She's not property. She's not for sale. Not now. Not ever." The two guards stepped forward. Mason didn't move. Instead, he placed himself fully between Raleigh and the others. "If you want to touch her," he said, "you'll have to go through me." The scarred alien paused. His smile disappeared. He studied Mason's face, then looked at Raleigh, who now stood taller, her hand gripping the notebook tight. Her feet were shaking, but she didn't run. She didn't hide, because someone was standing for her. "She's broken," the alien said with a sneer. "Why protect trash?" Mason didn't blink. "Because she's not trash. She's someone." A tense silence filled the room. Then the alien cursed under his breath, spat on the floor, and turned away. "She ain't worth it," he growled. "But don't think this is over. Paper or not, the galaxy don't forget. Trash stays trash." They left. Mason locked the door behind them, then turned to Raleigh. She stood frozen, still holding the notebook. Her breath came fast and shallow, but she wasn't crying. Not this time. He walked to her slowly. "You okay?" She nodded, then shook her head, then nodded again. Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. "He won't come back, and even if he does, I won't let him take you." She looked up at him, eyes full of fear, but something else too. Strength. She didn't feel invisible anymore. Her lips moved. He called me product," she whispered. Mason shook his head gently. "He's wrong. You're not what they made you. You're Raleigh." Her chin trembled. Then softly she said, "I remember stars, my mother's voice. I had a family once." "You still do," Mason said. She stepped forward slowly and did something she hadn't done with anyone in her life. She wrapped her arms around him. Her thin arms hugged him tight, as if anchoring herself to this world. And for the first time since he met her, she cried. But this time the tears weren't from pain. They were from release, from healing, from the knowledge that someone had fought for her. She wasn't alone. The next morning was calm. The storm from the day before, both outside and inside, had passed. Raleigh sat near the open window, sunlight touching her face, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea. The notebook rested in her lap. She traced her name with her finger over and over as if reminding herself it was real. Mason sat across the room, quietly fixing a damaged circuit board. He didn't speak much now. He knew Raleigh needed space. After what happened yesterday, after standing face to face with the man who once owned her, everything felt different. But she hadn't fallen apart. She had stood her ground. She had stayed. Now, something new was blooming in her chest. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was belonging. Later, Mason returned from the nearby shop with 2 bags. He laid out some fresh bread, fruit, and a soft scarf he thought Raleigh might like. She touched the fabric with wonder. It was deep blue, like a quiet night sky. She draped it over her shoulders and smiled. He smiled too. "It suits you." Her eyes met his, steady and warm. That evening, a visitor arrived, an alien woman who ran a nearby storage hub. She had heard about Mason's repairs and wanted to bring work. But when she saw Raleigh standing beside him, dressed clean and calm, she blinked in surprise. "Is that the girl from the market?" she whispered. Raleigh heard it. She didn't flinch. She stepped forward and said clearly, "My name is Raleigh." The woman blinked again. "You can talk?" Raleigh nodded. "I was never broken. I was just forgotten." The woman seemed unsure what to say, but she left the work order and walked away, shaking her head in disbelief. After she left, Raleigh turned to Mason. "Is that how they see me? Still?" He gave a sad smile. "Some will always see what they want, but what matters is what you see." She thought about that as she returned to her spot by the window. The world outside was wide, noisy, and dangerous, but from here, inside this little room, she saw it differently now. Not as a prison, but as a place where maybe, just maybe, she could begin again. That night, as stars filled the sky, Mason lit a small lantern and placed it on the table. Raleigh sat across from him with her notebook. She opened it to a new page and wrote something without showing him. After a few minutes, she quietly passed it across the table. Mason read the words slowly. "You didn't buy me. You saved me." He looked at her, eyes soft. "You're right." She turned the page and wrote again, "I was never for sale." A long silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything she had felt but never said, everything she had lost, everything she had found. Mason leaned back and looked at her with pride. "You were never property, Raleigh, not even when they chained you. You were always more." She gave a small, sad smile. "But no one saw it." "I did," he said. Her eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall. She closed the notebook and hugged it to her chest again. "You saw me lying there," she whispered. "Covered in flies. No one made an offer, but you did." He nodded. "Not to own you, to give you a chance." She stood and walked to the small mirror on the wall. She looked at herself again, but now the face staring back wasn't broken. It wasn't afraid, it was hers. "I want to help others," she said quietly. Mason tilted his head. "Others like you?" She nodded. "Slaves. The ones still waiting to be seen." He smiled slowly. "Then we'll start with one and see how far we can go." The next day, Mason gave her a toolkit of her own. Her hands were stronger now, her back straighter. She worked beside him, not as a rescued girl, not as a slave, but as a partner. Traders who once laughed now greeted her with respect. Children in the market pointed and said, "That's the girl who got free." And when a young alien child, dirty and alone, was brought to the edge of the market weeks later, Raleigh was the one who stepped forward first. She knelt beside the child, offered water and whispered, "It's okay. I was like you, but now I'm not." The child looked up, eyes wide. Raleigh smiled. She had once been bought for 10 credits. Now she gave others something no money could buy, hope. She was never for sale, and now she would never be silent again.